And Joe Biden has issued an executive order aimed at strengthening U.S. cyber defenses after a series of high-profile cyber attacks linked to China and Russia. The order targets key vulnerabilities, including Russia's disruption of satellite communications and China's infiltration of U.S. telecom networks. It focuses on enhancing encryption for federal communications, boosting cybersecurity, data sharing between agencies, and expanding the homeland security cyber agencies' powers. This order also aims to combat identity fraud, use AI to protect the energy sector, and streamline sanctions against cyber criminals. This move comes amid concerns over software security gaps, such as the 2023 Chinese hack of Microsoft, which exposed weaknesses in government tech systems. And in his final address to the nation as president, Joe Biden called for the creation of a new constitutional amendment to demolish the concept of presidential immunity from criminal prosecution. Joe Biden also added that, and I quote, "The president's power is not limited, it is not absolute, and it shouldn't be." Listen in to what he had to say.
We need to amend the Constitution to make clear that no president is immune from crimes that he or she commits while in office. The president's power is not limited. It's not absolute, and it shouldn't be.
Canada is preparing to impose tariffs on $105 billion worth of U.S. imports if the U.S. decides to levy tariffs on Canadian goods. This move is in response to President-elect Donald Trump's threats of economic force against Canada. Now, Canada has drawn up a list of U.S. manufactured items that would be hit with tariffs covering nearly a third of the value of U.S. goods imported by Canada. Although the specific products on the list haven't been disclosed, Canada's previous response to U.S. tariffs in 2018 included levies on items like whiskey and washing machines. We'll try and understand the consequences of this entire development. I'm, in fact, currently joined by Mithali Nikor. Mithali, thank you very much for speaking with NDTV. I want to understand the effectiveness of this entire retaliatory tariffs. Can the retaliatory tariffs be an effective strategy for Canada to negotiate better trade terms with the United States, or might they escalate the situation further?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here on NDTV this evening. I think, this is what we in economics traditionally call tit for tat tariffs. When a country threatens you with a set of tariffs, you say, you know what, it's not just us. Trade relationships are two ways. You are providing us with your commodities and exports as well. And in fact, your economy is also dependent on us, and therefore we will go ahead and impose these tariffs on you. Now, some of the commodities that they're talking about, like orange juice even, and steel, which is a massive import for Canada, once you put a higher tariff rate on it, say they are considering around 25% tariffs, that will increase the prices of these commodities for Canadian customers. And there are studies which have shown that the Canadian economy could be actually impacted by 1 to 1.5% of their GDP because of these tariffs that are imposed from Canada's side. So, at the end of the day, this is a trade war which is not going to benefit either the US or Canada. And on both sides, you're going to start seeing, economic losses to the GDP because the trade relationship for so many years has been optimized by the two countries.
Right. You made a great point about the economic consequences, including the effects on GDP there. I also want to understand the impact on trade relations. How do you think Canada's retaliatory tariffs affect US-Canada trade relations, and are there potential long-term consequences for the relationship between the two nations?
So I think one thing which is very interesting in how it's playing out, if you would have seen some of the news reports that are coming out from Canada today, there's been a meeting that, the former Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, has chaired along with the governors of various provinces in Canada. And one province actually has been a very interesting holdout, which is the province of Alberta, which actually provides, and exports a huge amount of Canadian oil and energy to the US. And they've actually said, you know what, we're not actually sure that we want to join this retaliatory tariffs plan, and we'll wait and watch, because they're the one province that stands to lose out the least, because oil imports from Canada to the US may not be levied, the tariffs may not be levied on oil, but may be levied on other Canadian commodities. So you can already see that the political economy has started playing out, and the states are actually diverging within Canada, the provinces within Canada diverging in how they respond to this.
Right. As far as the trade implications are concerned, and I'm talking about the global trade implications here, how do you think these tariffs impact global trade dynamics, particularly given the already strained trade relationships between the United States and other major economies such as China and the EU? How do you think it will have that effect there?
So I think it's very interesting. We will see a very huge re-engineering of supply chains, because at this point in time, for example, it's cheaper. I mean, let's take an analogy in South Asia. It's cheaper today for India to trade with the EU than to trade with some of its neighbors in South Asia, like Bangladesh, Nepal, and even Bhutan, because of high logistics costs, high transport barriers, and also high regulatory barriers. But it's actually cheaper to trade with the EU. So now think about a similar situation playing out in North America, where for so many decades they've actually worked on improving the efficiency at land borders. They've worked on improving comparative advantage economics on both sides, each of them specializing in certain commodities and then trading with each other. So I do think that once you introduce tariffs to that equation, there'll be a complete re-engineering of supply chains. And we have to see how that plays out. But Asia will be a big gainer in the process.
All right. Mithali, thank you very much for speaking with NDTV and sharing your views on this entire issue.